So this is none other than the world-famous Sam Morse, right? So he works for the Department of the Air Force, and he's got quite the resume. So he is an aerial drone pilot. He's been a producer and a director for the United States Air Force and the 2nd Combat Camera Unit, right?
Audiovisual Squadron.
Audiovisual, sorry.
We used to be ComCam.
They used to be ComCam. And he was a photojournalist in the Air Force for a good grip of years when he started his journey back in 2004. I'd like to formally introduce Mr. Sam Morse. Today's topic, cinematic motion.
So yeah, I'm Sam Morse. My passion is cinematography, and so we're going to talk cinematic motion because we're talking about a moving medium, video. So why wouldn't you want to move the camera, right? So we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk a little bit about the basics just to help you kind of get your brain back in the right mode of visual storytelling. We're going to talk about why we move the camera, and sometimes more importantly, why not to move the camera. We all have a tendency of like, ooh, I just got this shiny new toy. I just got a gimbal. I'm going to use it for everything. No. Do it once. Do a project where you just go overboard with it, and then get it out of your system, and then don't do that again, because that's bad. We're going to talk a bit about types of stabilizers and just kind of some quick tips to think about. And I'm going to show you some of these different camera stabilizers. Some of these, even the staff probably hasn't played with themselves yet. I tend to use a lot of weird gadgetry, but yeah, it's fun. But I mean, bottom line, why am I moving the camera? It's a visual medium. You're trying to add interest in things. And what I want you to ask yourself is, why am I moving this camera, right? Why am I doing this? Who's heard of the term motivated, insert blank? Motivated lighting, motivated movement. What does motivated mean? Speak up.
It's the motivation. Why is it doing it?
Why is it doing it? Yeah. Story. At the end of the day, if I ask why are you doing this, your answer should be story. I'm a notorious gear nerd, and even I'm telling you, it's story. Story is paramount. Story is more important than the gimbals you're using, the toys, the jibs. Story is everything. When we talk about cinematic movement, it's deliberate, it's purposeful. You're not just moving the camera just for funsies. There's a reason why you're moving in that direction at that speed with that amount of camera shake or lack of camera shake. And yeah, it's all story. So, kind of getting back to the basics a little bit, the Kulshav effect. Who's heard of this before? Any film students? Okay. New material. So basically what this is when you cut together your story, the way you cut them together, the juxtaposition of those clips means more than the clips by themselves, right? It seems pretty self-explanatory. But let's look at and just kind of a reminder, moving the camera does not replace good editing. So kind of like, camera movement's not going to replace a lack of story. It's also not going to it's not going to replace a lack of editing skills. So make sure that you're editing this movement well. Okay, so let's look at an example. I used some stock imagery off of Storyblocks for this, but I saw an example of this. I think it was Alfred Hitchcock that gave this particular example. This is different footage, but same idea. So we've got, a nice old man here. Nice little smile, looking at maybe grandkids on the beach or something like that with their dad. Like, it's a nice clip of a nice old grandpa, okay? All right, same starting clip, but I put a different shot in the middle. Now what does that tell you about him? Dirty old man, exactly. So the way you edit, the way that you visually tell this story, You know, the old adage, show, don't tell. Your editing matters so much with how your story is received on the end. So think through that. Think about ways that you can let the audience discover the story visually in the moment. Okay, enough talking about editing. This is about cinematic motion, right? So, terminology. A few people have seen this one before. Fun fact, I had a client one time for drone work where the phrase come up could mean ascend with the drone. It could mean tilt the camera up. And even one time, that phrase was used to tell me to tilt the camera down to bring the subject up in the frame. So specificity, clarity, super important. So if I take a camera, so this is your dolly in, dolly out. Trucking is going to be side to side. Jib, pedestal, movement. Boom also is a phrase for it. What am I missing? Yeah, so pan is this direction only. This is not a pan. This is a tilt. And then roll. And roll can be a useful camera movement. So don't necessarily dismiss that. I know generally speaking, especially in the day of gimbals, we're all about keeping that camera nice and level, but I deliberately, there's an example I'll show you later that uses roll to pretty good effect. Okay, if you're gonna do coverage, coverage basically means you're filming a scene and you're just trying to get good angles, right? Footage that you can use to cut in, cut out, etc. There's this thing called the 180-degree rule, also sometimes referred to as a line of action. And basically, say I'm talking to Todd up here, all of you are on that side of this line, this imaginary line between Todd and me. So if you keep your cameras on one side of that line of action or another, it basically gives your viewer spatial awareness of your scene. So if we do a shot reverse shot, and I cross that line of action to film the other person. So shot reverse shot is basically the over-the-shoulder shot that you've probably always seen of two people talking together. Over one shoulder, over the other shoulder, that's a shot reverse shot. If we're filming that, but we cross that line of action for the reverse, it's gonna look like we switched places. Or worse, it's gonna look like we're in two entirely different places. Where even if you do actually have two entirely different places, if you keep that imaginary line of action, it will look like they're occupying the same space. So this is something that you can use to cover things up. This is something you can use to just give your viewer spatial awareness. It's really important to be aware of that when you're picking your angles, picking your shots. Now, the way to cross that line of action, and you can do it in a very dramatic way, is to cross it mid-shot using a camera move. So one of the great ways to do this is, say you've got that shot reverse shot of two people talking. Say there's suddenly a change in dynamic of that conversation where one person's got the upper hand in a negotiation and now the other person does, or somebody just revealed a very important piece of information that one of the protagonists, it's revelatory. If you suddenly cross that line of action and then shoot the rest from the other side, it's going to visually show that change in dynamic and help kind of emphasize, oh, stuff just got real, right? Trying to have no expletives for the live stream. Y'all know what I actually meant. So this is all stuff to think about. Even times where you've got a whole group of people and they're all talking to each other, and even if it's like a continuous kind of circling shot going around them and it's cutting to different points, if you keep track of it, every time somebody is talking here and then turns and talks to somebody else, now that's the line of action. If you look at the next cut, it's going to respect that line of action. So just think through it. If you've got questions about that, I'm happy to explain it further, but also if you YouTube line of action, 180-degree rule. You'll get a lot of information on this. Any questions? Is this kind of familiar, or maybe something that like you've kind of thought about but never really put into words, codified? Cool. We'll keep moving on. Okay. So I'm going to show you a bunch of examples, and we're going to talk about like ways that you would use a camera move in dramatic or storytelling or interesting ways. So that's, by the way, that's Cheyenne Mountain. That is Airman Brittany. Oh, what's it, last name Russell? Yeah, she used to be Manchester. But anyway, so you've got the reveal, where you've got a shot that initially shows your protagonist or whoever, and then reveals something else that is in the frame, and it should be kind of surprising. So this one's kind of coming up and over to reveal the crowd below. And of course, the rocket. All right, so tracking. This is always fun, where you're moving with your subject and it allows your viewer to see that subject for longer. It lets the viewer kind of stay with the subject. And especially for things like this, it's kind of hard to see the shadow detail in that. But yeah, basically it's just taking a moving subject and letting them stay in frame longer. Now, sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes let your subject come in and exit frame normally, but it can be pretty cool, especially if you're following one particular person, to physically move with them. Lens flares. I love lens flares. And honestly, lens flares are at their best when the camera's moving. So all of this, you've got little splashes of light, little things happening, and whether you're moving the camera slow, moving the camera fast, it really helps that lens flare kind of pop and shine and do all the things that make us giddy. So if you are using some sort of lens flare as a visual element, try to move the camera a little bit and see if you can make that flare move. So adding visual interest. This kind of goes without saying, but in this particular project, we were filming the Band of Mid-America. And if you think about it, this entire scene, nobody's really moving. I mean, they're playing their instruments and stuff, but people are either sitting down and playing their instruments, or they're standing and they're not moving from that standing position. So all of the visual interest is in the set design, the lighting, and the camera movement. So leading the eye, I didn't have a lot of good examples for this particular one. This is actually something we did as a visual effect, but it lets you lead the viewer's eye. So in the case, I probably should have skipped that clip, but this, it guides the eye to where you're wanting them to read on this plaque. Okay, and heightening emotion. So this is where we're actually using a roll to get kind of a floaty effect, And this one is just, quick and smooth motion, but then you could go handheld and get that kind of, intense, visceral combat sort of footage. So think about how your camera move and your style and your choice of camera support can add emotion to your project. Okay, so this one I did not shoot. This is what we call a Nory Cam. So getting perspective, and when they show the actual clip, this is getting you that in-your-face, almost first-person shooter style perspective. And so that's a way that you can visually tell the emotions of your main subject, to literally put your viewer in their shoes and in their perspective. Okay, so quick note. Who's heard of rolling shutter before? A couple people? So camera sensors scan top to bottom, and most camera sensors these days, there's a delay between the top and the bottom of the frame. And cameras are getting better and better and better all the time, and that delay is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. But especially older cameras still have pretty significant rolling shutter effects where there's that delay. And what can end up happening is as you shake the camera or pan super quick, you'll actually see vertical lines slant. Or if you're handheld, it looks like Jell-O because the top and the bottom are doing this sort of thing. And it doesn't look very good. We were gonna do an example. I don't think any of the cameras up here have significant rolling shutter. If you're curious about that, I can show you some examples later. But basically, if you're dealing with an older camera, especially one that is designed primarily for stills, so Sony, that's going to be their A7 series. That's not A7S. So A7 III, A7 IV, A7R series. Nikon, the Z6 series, with the exception of the new Z6 III. The Z7 series, Canon, I know a lot of their newer cameras. I think I looked up with the R5C and the C70, both of them have very minimal rolling shutter. So if you go handheld with those, for the most part, you're gonna be good. But if you're going to those older cameras or photocentric cameras, just realize you are probably gonna deal with significant rolling shutter. So going full on monkey cam with it may not be a good idea. Just technical limitations of your equipment. Some cameras, anything that with a stacked sensor is going to be very good. Anything with a global shutter is going to be perfect. So the handheld footage of the Special Forces, that was shot on a red Komodo. That has a global shutter. So it is capturing the entire image all at once, and there's no delay between the top and bottom. Usually outside the budget of military units, but certain ones, and I mean, they're more reasonable than you might think. I think you can get a Komodo 6K for like $6,000. Yeah, which is, I mean, that's about what an FX6 costs. That's about what a lot of these kind of professional, but still kind of entry level cinema cameras. You do have to rig up a red. And red branded accessories, anything with the red tag, like add 200 or 300% to that price. But just stuff to think about. And when your units are getting ready to purchase cameras and things like that, it's something to seriously consider. You know, if you are working for a special operations wing or a special operations unit, or work with special operations a lot where you'd want to go handheld and get that kind of Saving Private Ryan look and such, see if you can get a camera with a stacked sensor or a global shutter. It can really help you out. Yeah. Yeah, action footage of firefighters, handheld, going, yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about some other camera moves. So, and actually the shadow you see to the right, that's Aaron Mailer, so a little cameo there. The slow creep in. So this is something where you're just doing a very, very slow camera movement, a dolly in, and or it doesn't even have to be a slow creep forward. It can be a creep backward. It can be a creep to the side. But you're just adding a little bit of movement to an otherwise static shot. And that can do a few different things. Like in this one, it actually helps you see that there's a person there that's camouflaged. A slow push-in can heighten tension, heighten emotion. It can make it feel like, oh, something's about to happen. Same thing doing a slow creep out. It could be kind of a sense of relief. It could be like, oh, okay, that's finally done. Lots of different ways that you can use that, but just realize that when you're talking about these ever so slight movements, that's when you really want to be on like a slider or jib or something where there is a mechanical guide to your motion, because the slower you go, the smoother you have to be, and the smoother you have to be, the more mechanical assistance you need. So we're going to talk more about that here in a minute. All right, so there's also what's called the snap zoom. So I'm sure some of y'all have been told never zoom mid-shot, right? A few of you? Oh, okay. A lot of old hat video folks are like, never zoom mid-shot, it looks unprofessional. Well, if you use it well, it gives you kind of a documentary sort of feel. You've probably seen snap zooms in like the show The Office or Battlestar Galactica, where they're trying to get that documentary feel and like, oh, something happened, turn the camera, snap zoom in to add focus there. Oh, I forgot to get an example for the next one, so we're gonna skip through that. Counter movement. So in this particular case, you're doing a more complex movement. So in this first shot, it was a push in. And as I moved past the subject, I turned the camera so that she was still in the shot throughout the entire thing. So that can, kind of like a tracking shot, this one also kind of serves as a reveal where you start looking down, and as it pedestals down, it's tilting up to reveal the F-35 in the background. So just things to think about. You don't just have to track with your subject. You can track against them and still track with them enough that it works for the shot. And that firefighter shot, actually that's apropos for all the firefighter unit, or people who deal with firefighters, I should say. I'm guessing nobody in here actually fights fires, but, or correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, just different ways that you can add drama to your shot. This, you got a fast push in, you've got a turn, and it really just heightens the emotion of everything. So when we talk about a camera move, really it boils down to three different things. You've got the direction that you're going, you've got the speed that you're doing it, and the stability of the camera. All three of those should factor into your decision process. So I'm going to show you a clip. I'm going to try not to tell you too much about it ahead of time, but this is a rough cut version of a project that we've already finished. It's already released, but the rough cut kind of helps tell this point a little bit better. We were filming a video for the Air Force Band, and we were showing basic training and the musicians occupying the same space, but we wanted to show both of those visually different so that there was kind of a clear delineation between what was the band scene and what was the basic trainees. So I want you to watch through this, try to spot the differences, and tell me what is different about this that lets you differentiate between the two. Let's see. Actually, I do have a little bit of sound for this, so I'll just play it out the laptop speakers. So starting out handheld.
Hurry up! Get up! Get dressed! Let's go! Hurry up! Hurry up! Hurry up! Hurry up! Get warmed up! Let's go! Hurry up! Hurry up! Get warmed up!
Okay, There's a lot going on there. So what did y'all see? Tube lights. So lighting was a big factor. I wish we could claim responsibility for the perfect fog that we had, but that was just a happy, yeah. What else did you see?
It looked like the recruits were handheld and shaky, and the band was steady.
Mm-hmm.
Very smooth footage.
Yep. Yeah, that was kind of one of the big visual differences. We had the occasional smooth shot in the basic trainee footage just to kind of give the eye a break. But yeah, a lot of it was meant to have that in the moment feel for the basic trainees, and then nice and smooth and, you know, dramatic, but, you know, elegant in a way, footage for the band. We also used shutter speed to effect in there, where we cranked the shutter speed of the cameras for the basic trainee footage to 1/1000th of a second, specifically to get that extra choppy handheld look, kind of the Saving Private Ryan, you know, military footage sort of thing. So, you know, that's something where even in the same project, occupying the same space, you can get very different looks, very different feels just by changing the way that you can move the camera and, you know, how you approach your subject. So, actually, I'm going to show you this real quick. So, this is from that same shoot, and the director, Mike McCool, initially, he's all about the smooth cinematic type of footage. And I'm like, I think we really need to go handheld here. And so we shot a couple of scenes both ways just to see what we liked. And we realized, oh, wait, yeah, we really need to go handheld with this. So this first take of this guy, it almost looks like somebody's holding him up, right? Granted, that is a testament to his strength. But we realized when we went handheld with it, it felt better because now we've got, you know, that choppiness, we've got the shake. It looks like he's actually struggling a little bit. So that was that part. There was also this shot coming out the door. Again, we went smooth. There's a little bit of shake, but for the most part, it went nice and smooth. And then there's the version that actually went into the final video that was handheld, and just look at how different that feels. Same shot, same camera move, two totally different feels for the way that it went together. So go back here. So let's talk about stability for a minute. There's basically two main categories of stabilization. There is stabilization that corrects for pan, tilt, and roll without really doing anything with the position of the camera. And then there are stabilizers that also help with the position of the camera itself. When we talk about gimbals, image stabilization, optical steady shot, vibration reduction, whatever the camera company calls it, that is a mechanical optical stabilization of the lens. Digital stabilization, those things only correct for pan, tilt, and roll. And that's really important to remember because if you notice, the electronic stabilization, that's also your warp stabilizer in post. So if you've got a gimbal or something like that and it's stabilizing your shot, but you get a little bit of positional shake, warp stabilizer is not going to save you because it's already stabilized for the type of stabilization that warp stabilizer can do. So if you're realizing that your footage is shaky, but you're already using some of these pan, tilt, roll stabilization methods, you might need to do something a little bit different to get your stable shot because it's probably not going to correct in post. When you talk about positional stability, you either need mass, so use inertia to your advantage, or you're going to need to brace against something. That could also be something like a slider where it's on rails. I mean, that's basically bracing against the two sides of the rail system. And then slow motion. Skipping forward. So let's talk about slow motion for a second. Everything really does look better in slow motion, right? I have found situations where it doesn't, and I've found situations where there is such thing as too slow. Kind of the rule of thumb that I have in my mind is 60 frames per second looks great for something that's like a walking pace. Looks fantastic. 120 is for like a jogging pace. You know, something where there's a bit more action going on and you really want to slow it down and see the drama. When you get to like 240 frames per second, it really needs to be explosive action. Either an actual explosion or a water splash or something along those lines. Otherwise, it's just gonna drag on forever and nobody's gonna want to see that. I learned this the hard way when I shot people walking on a flight line at 120 frames per second, and 120 was way too overcranked. It was way too slow. They were just, you know, sitting there just like, you know, it was bad. So there is such thing as too slow. But the cool thing with slow motion is it does actually stabilize your camera a bit, because it gets rid of some of the micro jitters. It gets rid of, it slows down the camera shake and makes it more smooth. The thing to remember is if you go the opposite direction, the reverse is true as well. So if you do like a time lapse and you're wanting to have like a slider move during the time lapse, you really need to be on some sort of motion control motorized system to get that smooth shot, because you actually need more stability with fast motion than you do with slow motion. Any questions there? Am I losing anybody? Hi. Either you're lying or I'm doing a good job. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about general tips. Commit to the shot. So one thing that we see from our less experienced shooters a lot is, you know, you're at an event and there's a lot of stuff going on, and you know, you're looking at this thing, but oh, there's something over here, and then we go over here, and then go over here, and then go over. Commit to the shot. If you see a shot taking place, commit to it. Go through the whole motion or the whole shot if you're not doing a movement. Let it play out, then go on to your next thing. Stay aware of your surroundings, though. Be aware of what's going on around you. But once you commit to a shot, commit to the shot. You trust me, you don't want to come back to the editing bay and just be like, man, I don't have more than 2 seconds of anything. I helped judge the AMC Air Mobility Command media contest last year, last year, calendar year. This year was the judging, and one of the B-roll packages, no joke, had shots that were half a second long. How do you use that? I mean, unless you're just doing like rapid flash frame cutting for a quick section, that's not usable. Commit to your shot. Camera move should have a beginning, a peak, and an end. So start your shot, move, and then slow to a stop. Give yourself breathing room. With the Band of Mid-America shoot in the kind of banquet hall looking place, the closing shot, we held that pullback way longer than everybody was expecting us to. Pretty much we started to have people looking at us like, hey, is he gonna call cut? Is he gonna call cut? Mailer, you know, you were there. And when you actually see it in the final shot, that breathing room that it gave to the ending of the video, it let you just absorb the music, breathe, and then it ended. So sometimes holding that shot for longer than you think you need is helpful. And be aware that when the adrenaline hits, has anyone kind of experienced that it almost is like you're in slow motion when you're in the middle of a shoot, because your adrenaline's going, you're thinking about things, and there's so much going on. And then you get back to the end bay and like, wait, I thought I held that way longer than I did. It's because the adrenaline's pumping. So be aware of that and compensate. If you feel the adrenaline going, shoot longer than you think you need to, just to make sure that when you get into your edit, you've got enough of that shot to use it. Think like an editor. A lot of you guys probably edit your own stuff. A lot of us edit our own stuff. Sometimes you don't, but you want to think like an editor when you're shooting. So if I'm doing a camera moving where I'm trucking to the left, I'll try to get that same shot trucking to the right. Because if I try to cut that with another trucking shot, and I only have one going, moving to the right, but I shot this other one and I'm only moving to the left, if I try to cut those back to back, it's gonna be kind of jarring to suddenly be changing directions one shot after the other. So try to get more than one direction. If you can go all of the directions, even better, but that might be a little excessive. But if you've got a slider set up, it takes almost no extra time to just move the slider in the opposite direction once you're done with one direction. Edit the video in your head. This is something that as you grow in experience, you'll be able to do more and more. But think through your shots. How are they going to piece together? Am I shooting everything from the same level? Do I need to maybe get a high angle? Do I need to maybe get a low angle? Is everything a push-in? There was the sequence with the night sniper. Every shot was a push-in, and I realized once I put all three of those clips together, they actually didn't work together as well as I hoped they would, because it was weird. It turned out what worked best was to go wide, tight, then medium. Well, if I'm pushing in on the tight, and then I'm also pushing in on that final medium, that actually kind of cut weird. It didn't work as well as I wanted it to. It would have been better if I could have also shot that going the opposite direction. Now, in that particular situation, literally the guy had 4 shots for us to film, or actually no, 3 shots for us to film. Those were the 3 shots. That was my one chance to get those 3 shots. So, you don't always get that flexibility, but think about how your shots are going to cut together. And if you've got questions, this is a great place to think through your shots. The more you can think through in advance, pre-production is so important with video. The more you can think ahead and plan out your shots, the better time you're going to have in your edit. It also helps you from overshooting, where you're trying to get coverage, you're trying to get film in both directions. Well, maybe you really don't need it, and just get the one direction, get what you need. I've got what I need for the shot that I need. I don't need to go the other direction. I don't need to overshoot. And that's just going to speed up your editing time, because you're not wading through piles and piles of footage to find those couple of clips that you knew you needed from the start. Cool? So this kind of ties back to the first couple things, but set up your move and wait for the action. Like if you do this really cool camera move and you see, every once in a while a person crosses from one direction to another and it fills the frame really nicely, wait for the next person to do that same thing. If somebody does it once, they're probably going to do it again. Wait for that to happen and do your move with the action. Nothing's worse than having, there's plenty of things worse, but it's a bad thing when you have this gorgeous camera move and there's no substance to it because there's no action. There's no story behind it. Remember, everything comes back to story. You're not just doing a camera move for funsies. If you can have a subject in there, if you can have something that ties the viewer to the scene and an action for them to follow, then the camera movement becomes window dressing. It enhances the story rather than trying to replace it. And generally speaking, a simple move executed well is going to be better than a complex move executed poorly. So when you start getting into all this theory behind camera moves and all this stuff, it's really tempting to want to do, okay, I'm going to pedestal down and then push in and then all this. Keep it simple. If you can do a simple shot but shoot it well, that is going to have greater impact to your audience than a crazy shot that you didn't quite get right because you don't have the right equipment for it, or your experience level isn't quite there. When you start to get into the more versatile camera support systems, there's skill involved. The tilt-to-float system that I'm going to show you, if it's your first time shooting with it, expect to fail a lot. It's probably not going to look that great. So make sure you're practicing. Make sure that you're, shooting to your skill level where you can shoot something simple but well. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. So we've been talking about all these different stabilizers and stuff like that. How do I pick one? So I'm assuming that most units are not like ours, where we literally have a warehouse of camera gear that we can pick from. So in a lot of cases, it's going to be what your unit has available to you. But even then, usually there's a couple of options. And when you go out on a job, you're not going to take everything that your shop owns. So first question is it feasible to bring it? We've got a 22-foot jib, crane type looking thing. I didn't bring it to this workshop. There's a reason for that. It would have been super cool to show it to y'all, but it literally wouldn't fit in the room. And it would have been a royal pain and very expensive to try and ship it here to DC from Utah. So is it feasible? Do you know it, or do you have time to learn? I bought a Steadicam, which is a mechanical stabilizer. It's what we used before gimbals were a thing. And I got this thing. I was super excited to use it. Literally the day that it came in the mail, I tried to go out and use it on an actual work shoot. That was a bad day. That was a bad day. I got the footage I needed, but not without a lot of frustration and a lot of difficulty and a lot of blown takes. So make sure that you are giving yourself time to learn the piece of equipment before you go out into the field and try to use it. Especially if you're doing something where you're doing controlled action and the people in your shot are your customer. You don't want them waiting on you to figure out how to use your camera gear. You just don't. If you can walk in and you get the shot and 2-3 takes, you got it, it's gonna make you look so much better, and they're gonna trust you on the edit a lot more. If you look disorganized and not really fully in control of what's going on set, do you think that customer is gonna be like, oh yeah, they got the edit, I'm sure they know exactly what they're doing? No. So that kind of gets into that customer relation thing. Can you use it for more than one kind of shot? This is something that I'm a huge stickler for, where if I bring a piece of equipment, I want it to do more than one thing. Or if it only does one thing, that needs to be something that I absolutely need, because I want to bring all the things. I want to have all the options available to me, but I can only bring so much. And then my airmen complain. Realistically, I want to keep as little gear as possible so that I have flexibility, but that means that gear has to be flexible as well. So yeah, you want something that can do more than one thing. Does it have the character that you want? As I show you some of these different camera stabilizers, each of them has a slightly different character. Some of them have a lot of stability, some have only a little bit of stability, some of them have kind of a floaty feel. The tilt-to-float is that one. It's very well named. But Handheld is going to have that handheld sort of feel. What is the character of motion that you want? Does it have the reach? So, sliders are great, but if you're trying to do a dolly shot down a hallway, you're not going to get very far. So think about what the reach is that you need. Maybe you need to do something that you can handhold, or maybe you need to see if there's. I've actually seen footage. I think it was Jimmy Shea in a like a kid's. What do they call them? The carts. The wagon, yeah. This little toy wagon sitting in the back of it with a camera, and the footage looked gorgeous because it's stabilized. It's literally on wheels. It's essentially a dolly. Just it's a children's toy rather than an actual dolly. So don't be afraid to improvise. Will it draw too much attention? This is honestly an important thing when you're trying to do uncontrolled action or out in the public or something like that. You don't always want to draw a lot of attention to yourself. That's going to be really important this weekend as well. If you set up a motorized jib and all this stuff and all this technical things, out in the National Mall, the cops are probably going to wonder why you don't have a filming permit. You might want to dial it back a bit. Which, by the way, the National Mall does actually require filming permits. So just be aware of some of the more popular places to film here in the DC area, shooting permits. For a tripod. But sometimes, they're getting smart to like gimbals and stuff like that too. But in any case, are you planning on doing close-ups with it? You're going to see this much more here in a second when I actually pull out some stabilizers, but the closer you get to your subject, the more stability you need because, from a distance, a little bit of translational movement, you're actually not going to see it that much. That's why gimbals are so good. But the moment you do a close-up with it, that's when it starts to give itself away because that little bit of movement is magnified in that small subject or that close camera perspective. Can it handle the weight of the camera and accessories? So I'm probably a bad example of this because I had my little spindly tripod with the wireless camera we had this morning. That was arguably too small of a tripod for that camera setup. But it worked. It worked. But that is something to think about, especially when you start talking about camera stability, because if you've got something, if here, that little spindly tripod worked because we're basically on concrete under this floor. But if I have that out on like a wooden bridge or something like that where there is some flex to it, that flex is going to be amplified through the spindly legs and it's going to shake the camera. Or if you're in a house or something where there's a little bit of flex to the floor, as somebody walks by it, it's going to shake the camera. So beefier stuff tends to give you more stability. Tends to. It also gives you mass, which mass helps with stability because of inertia. And last, but certainly not least, is it safe? Is it safe to do the thing that you're trying to do? So if you are, this really gets into it when you're talking about like cable cams, drones, things like that. I can't count the number of times that I've been asked to fly super close to my subject with a drone, and I'm like, y'all, this isn't safe. I gotta call knock it off. Like, no, we're not flying a drone 6 inches from their face. We're not doing it. Because if anything goes wrong, that is risk to the talent. That is risk to people on my set. My first golden rule of is it a good shoot with a drone is, did the drone come back and more importantly, were there no injuries? Cool, it was a successful shoot. Oh, and we got cool footage too. Now, when you're not talking about drones and cable cams, the danger level isn't quite as much, but it's still something to think about. If you're using a large jib or hanging a camera from something, maybe add a safety cord or something like that to make sure that it doesn't drop on somebody if you're doing an overhead shot. If you're trying to rig up a camera on somebody's vehicle or inside the cockpit of an aircraft, thankfully this didn't go badly, but it could have. We rigged up a GoPro on the underside of the canopy, kind of dead center. It fell off mid-flight. And the pilot had to kind of retrieve it and stick it somewhere else. But if that had fallen into the wrong place, hit a button that was bad, I mean, that could have ended badly. So think through that. Is it safe for me to put a camera here? Any questions on any of those? Any funny stories? Y'all are boring. Come on. Okay. So, getting into actual tips. Realistically, your shoes matter. If you are walking with a camera, the type of shoes that you use matter. So if you have shoes that have a sharp, hard heel, that heel strike, as you step, it's actually going to shake through your body and shake the camera just a little bit. Not a ton, but I know I've worn different types of shoes, and I'm like, wow, my footage is a lot shakier than it normally is. It can usually be traced back to the shoes. So if you have options for footwear, something with a soft sole and like a rolled heel is really going to help you out. So heel to toe footsteps. So what am I talking about here? I actually learned these in marching band, but you're going heel to toe, kind of squatting a little bit, and then coming back, you're rolling through your footstep as well. And the goal is to glide forward, glide backwards. You're trying to roll your footstep so that you translate as little of that impact into your camera as possible. So you could have the softest shoes in the world, but if you don't have good technique, if you don't have a good rolled heel strike, it's going to be tough. Bending your knees, we talked about that. So 3 points of contact are better than 2. So let's actually get some camera examples here. Y'all have been looking at my slides for too long. Okay, could I get camera 5 up on the screen? Oh, it might take a second. Waiting for the Hollyland monitor transmitter to connect. There we go. So if I'm holding this camera with one hand, you got a bit of camera shake there, right? Now, if I add a second hand to that, look at how much smoother that already got. Now, if I add a third point of contact, much, much smoother. So just stuff to think about. You can go back to slides. So, resting on the ground can actually be too stable. So, for that scene with the basic trainees waking up, there were times where I was low enough that I could just set the camera on the ground. As soon as I did, all that nice, like, kind of jitteriness that gave it that feel went away. So I ended up just propping it up ever so slightly on a finger or something like that, just to get it up off the ground and get that movement back in the shot. Support devices like easy rigs for long shoots really help with avoiding muscle fatigue. As your muscles get fatigued, they get shaky. It's funny how that works. But I've got an easy rig at home, and I ended up getting it specifically for long shoots because it supports the weight of the camera, and even though it ended up translating a little bit of my body's motion into the camera, because it kept my arms fresh throughout the whole day, I was able to be consistent throughout the whole day rather than being really smooth at the beginning and then getting progressively shakier towards the end. When you're trying to stabilize the camera, the wider your grip, so you see a lot of like side handles that come out far, the wider your grip is, the more stable you'll be. But if you've got something like a Steadicam or something like that, the closer you can get to the center, actually you translate less of your motion into it. There's times where I'll operate a tripod from the head rather than the handle because I'm imparting too much shake on that fluid head using the handle. I just want a very, very slow motion. Add mass and spread it out. So Steadicams work on inertia alone. The more you spread out that weight, the more stable it's going to be. The more it's kind of tucked together, the more easily it moves around. Tuck your elbows. Straps. So, pardon me. Did I bring it up? Yes, I did. So, I ended up picking up this little guy. There we go. So I'm sure folks have seen, handheld gimbals like this, right? Well, you can get a bit of camera shake in here if you add a side handle. So now I'm spreading my hands apart. That's one of those things. And I've got 2 points of contact as well. If I take this strap and put it over my head and extend it, like actually press it against my body, I mean, you can see immediately how much more steady that got. So anything you can use to brace the camera is going to help your shot.
Yeah. Out there, because with the gimbal, that's great. But if you're just handheld, I've found that if I press, because I do it all the time, but if I push too much, then I get a lot of little micro shakes.
Yeah, you gotta find the balance. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to be like, "Arr!" Yeah, this is my last slide. Okay. Yeah, brace it against your body too. You saw how as soon as I braced the back of the camera against my chest, it smoothed out considerably, even more than adding a second hand. And you can brace off of other things as well. So, if I'm trying to get a shot and I don't have to move a whole lot, I might just rest my palm right here. Now I've got a handheld look, but it only has a little bit of shake instead of a whole ton.